Hello and welcome to another We Are Sunderland briefing. My name is Joe Ramage. I'm joined by Dom Shaw, company in partnership with the Sunderland Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and also plug for our website as well. Make sure you get on there, plenty of content, particularly with all the head coach search going on. Just £1 to subscribe for 6 months worth of content and $2.99 thereafter. Dom, we considered having a little bit of a break this week, maybe only just doing the one. But even when things are quiet for Sunderland, they're not quite quiet for Sunderland, are they? Quite a few developments as such in the realms of social media, which we're always kind of reluctant to delve into, but one or two credible sources as well, and lots of links and ruling people in and out and things like this in terms of their coach search. So we thought we'd jump on. I don't really know where to start with. I suppose we'll start with Will Still, because he's been the one constant over the course of the last 6 months, really, but then particularly since his exit from Reims. We understand that he's one that Sunderland have spoken to in recent weeks, but then there's some deliberation about how far along that is, if it's along at all. Certainly no agreement in place, but then reports came out yesterday that he'd signed with a new agency. I think in this country, that drums up interest as well. And then Belgian reporter Sasha Taviloeri, apologies if you're watching, Sasha, if that's wrong pronunciation of your name, but he linked Still with a move back to France with Lens to possibly replace their outgoing head coach, who might be going to go to Nice. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of dominoes need to fall here. But I mean, where do we sit on Will Still? Do we think that this one is sort of going out of reach of Sunderland now? I think I asked you the question the other day, didn't I? At what point does Sunderland need to put an ultimatum in here and say that he's not for us anymore? Likewise, Still, I suppose, as well. You can throw that in. Where does he draw the line and say that the club aren't meeting what I want, and this one comes to an end?
Yeah, there's a few things to consider with Still. It feels like a lot's happened this week and nothing's happened with Still and with the head coach situation in general. Still's clearly well thought of in France after his work at Reims. Lens have reportedly identified him as their top target. That is undoubtedly, I would imagine, a very attractive job, but Still has talked openly and repeatedly about his desire to manage in England. Now, as he spent the summer, as he spent the last couple of weeks, like his agent, old or new, is clearly keen to get his name out there. It's clear that he's ready to step straight back into management. As he talked with Norwich, we know he's spoken with Sunderland. How kind of formal or informal and how far those talks have progressed, we're not sure, but there has been contact, as there was in December. So as he spent the last couple of weeks kind of assessing his options and seeing what's out there. Previously, I know we've touched on this in previous vids, I think he was loosely linked with West Ham. Like I might be wrong, but I don't know what you think. My indication is like Will Still's not going to get a Premier League job now. So is he now looking at it and thinking, well, if I go to Lens and do a good job there, will that be a step to the Premier League? Do I kind of need to take not one step back to take two forward? But you get the point I'm making. How long does Sunderland leave it? How if Still is the top target, if Still's the one they want, there comes a time where you've just got to make a decision, haven't you? And if he's not going to come, you go for someone else. It's June tomorrow, and here we go again talking about the timescales and when Sunderland can expect to get someone in. I probably sit here now, and as a football reporter, this is probably not what you should be admitting, but I think I'm probably more uncertain and in the dark now over anyone else since this process started as to who's going to be the next head coach. Early, like if you'd have asked me this on Wednesday when we last spoke, I'd have taken a punt at Still. That, as we said, everything was pointing towards that, even though there was clear obstacles. But why hasn't that? If that is going to be the case, why hasn't that happened already? And then there's Raphael Wicky and all that's happened this week.
Yeah, we'll come on to him shortly, but just on Still as well. I mean, that Lens one's an interesting one, isn't it? Particularly given, he hasn't been outspoken in terms of wanting to come over to England, like you said, ambition to manage in the Premier League. I agree. I don't necessarily think the Premier League team's going to be banging on his door as such. I mean, the Norwich one was interesting. I think he was linked with Hull as well, their vacancy, obviously Sunderland. So feels as though that top end of the Championship or clubs who are going to be striving to get into the Premier League this season might be where he's at. But the Lens one, I think they finished 7th this season. Like you say, that if that was to come off, like there's a lot of dominoes need to fall, I think, for that one to come in at the minute, because they've still got the manager in place, as far as I'm aware. Could there be more potential there, like you say, to possibly go and finish in a European place or something like that next season, and, like you say, hold out for a Premier League move further down the line?
It's that balance, isn't it? And it's that balance with players, Jack Clark, Jobe Bellingham, I'm sure we're going to get onto here. Managers will always back themselves, won't they? So Still would back himself to succeed at Lens and then get a move. But how often do you get a chance to manage a club like Sunderland? We still might say twice, because there's been December and now. But opportunities like this to manage a club of this magnitude don't come along all the time, do they? And this does feel like quite a unique situation, I think, for this time of year. For 3, I know obviously Norwich have made their appointment now, but for 3, perhaps 4, 5 actually now. Burnley, sorry. So I forgot about Burnley. So before Norwich made their appointment, there was Burnley, Norwich, Sunderland, and Hull. Promotion contenders, candidates they'd hope next season. They'd all be aiming to be in the mix. A couple of them, absolutely, undoubtedly. West Brom might well lose Corberan if reports are to be believed. So you've got potentially, or have had, a handful of top-end Championship clubs looking for new managers. That feels rare to me. That doesn't feel like a seasonal occurrence. But it all comes down to timing, doesn't it? If it's not going to be Still, who's it going to be? Someone whose name we don't know yet. It certainly doesn't sound like it's going to be Raphael Wicky. All the suggestions yesterday were that it's not going to be Raphael Wicky, which leads us back to kind of who then? Paul Heckingbottom's the only name who's been linked and who's still available. If not, you're getting into the realms of names that haven't crept out yet, which we know is the case, by the way. We've talked about that, don't we? We know there are candidates whose names haven't got out into the public. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, intriguing, and confusing, all in equal measure, isn't it?
But on Still as well, he seems very active on it, doesn't he? He was on social media yesterday correcting Sky Sports News's story about him being linked with Sunderland, which is where Reims finished. Even things like that, it's only adding to the speculation of it all, isn't it? And I guess the intrigue, if you want to call it that. Not intrigue for us almost, but yeah. It's just odd, isn't it, at the minute? It seems to have gone on that long that we're reaching a little bit of a strange period of this appointment phase.
Yeah, I mean, strange as earlier this week you were sending me screenshots of Will Still's brother sunbathing. That's the stage. That's the stage we're at, aren't it? Where we're all looking for clues. We're all looking for those like little tidbits that might indicate where it's going. And patience is wearing thin now. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And what hasn't helped Sunderland's cause is the fact that clubs have since, long after Beale went, clubs have since disposed of their own managers and swiftly appointed replacements. Norwich being the prime example. A couple of weeks. We've moved beyond 100 days now. What did you say the Niall Quinn one was earlier this week? 141?
141, I think, yeah.
Surely we can't get there.
Do you think it's fair, though, some of that as well? Because it has been quite quiet, hasn't it? Like, in terms of stuff that we're getting, a lot of it is sort of just social media presence at the moment, which, again, you're reluctant to comment on and speculate on. But such is the way that football in the world is now, that almost puts more pressure on that wouldn't usually be there, would it? Because if the Still thing doesn't come off now, it feels as though the club will probably get hit with that. They'll get tarnished a little bit with that when we don't necessarily know how far down the line that this was. So it's all played out through fans just wanting to know anything. But then that might seem a little bit unfair. Do you understand what I'm trying to say there?
100%. And like I apologise here for kind of, it feels like we are repeating ourselves with certain things. But I think we were saying last time we recorded, certain things will probably only become clear when an appointment is made. Yeah. So we might be sat here in 2 weeks' time saying, "Oh, bloody hell, Sunderland deserve immense credit for keeping that under wraps for 3 months," or we might be sat here saying, "Well, it's clear they didn't get target A, B, C, or D," and if that is the case, so like I know we've named cropped up a few times. But say if Paul Heckingbottom was appointed, Paul Heckingbottom, I think, would be like a perfectly solid and sound appointment for a championship team chasing promotion. He's won promotion before. He has experience of the league. He has experience working with young players because he's been in charge of the youth team at Sheffield United. But the kind of being understandable reaction was like, well, we've waited 4 months for Paul Heckingbottom, who's been at work. Now, I'm not saying that is going to be, but it's just an example of how that's going to make it difficult if an appointment is made now and it's kind of underwhelming. All it does is put pressure on results and put pressure on the incoming manager to get off to a good start. At the minute, though, and I know like some bosses will say like we have to rise above that and just make sure we're getting the right man. But at the minute, it doesn't feel like this weight is helping anyone, really, does it?
No, I totally agree. And then when you get links yesterday with another name, and all they seem wide of the mark. What you mentioned earlier, Raphael Wicky, came out. Raphael Wicky from Calcio Mercato. That was the link saying that Sunderland reached a 2-year agreement. We understand that that's not the case or hasn't been the case. But just a little background on him: 75 caps for Switzerland as a player. Once he retired, he became a coach at youth level with FC Thun, Servette, moved into Basel with the youth teams as well there. He was there for about 5 years, I think, before he became first team manager. He was actually in charge of Basel when they beat Man City in the Champions League. It was the City's first defeat at the Etihad for almost 2 years, I think. I know the tie was already over after first leg. But yeah, he was the manager in charge then. I think he beat Man United in that season as well. Won the Swiss Cup, won the league as well, moved to America. He was part of the youth setup of the national team. And he went to Chicago Fire, returned to Switzerland with young boys in 2022, won a domestic double. And he was sacked earlier this year with them form dropping off. When you list off those credentials, you can understand why he'd be someone that would maybe be linked. But yeah, our understanding is that hasn't been the case, other than very early in proceeding.
Yeah, a kind of one of countless potential candidates who was kind of assessed very, very, very early on. But as you say, our understanding is there hasn't been any concrete talks, and there certainly hasn't been. I think those, from what I gather, those reports yesterday saying a deal had been agreed was kind of met by as much surprise in the club as it was us. I might be wrong here. I might be off the mark, but kind of does suggest an agent being hard at work, doesn't it? He's been heavily linked with Burnley this week as well. As we were saying not so long ago, just now, about the vacancies in the Championship at the minute. If you're a manager who's looking for a move into the Championship, into England, now feels like a good time, really. Yeah. But yeah, as those reports yesterday were wide of the mark. There hasn't been any concrete talks. As far as we're concerned, he's not a live candidate. And the kind of point was stressed to me yesterday is there isn't an agreement in place with him. There isn't an agreement in place with anyone at the minute. The process is still ongoing.
And that's the key thing here that I was going to come to. The fact with him being linked with, his name coming up and an agent, if that is the case, doing that, putting his name out there for Sunderland, is that a bit of a worry that an agent can still feel that it's possible to put his name in the ring? Because that would suggest that, like what you've just said there, that there's no agreement in place with anyone, and again, there could still be legs to run with this process.
You could look at it like that. It could also be a compliment, couldn't it? He's been linked with Sunderland and Burnley. This is an attractive job, isn't it? I know we've talked about a fair few of the kind of negative elements over the last few weeks, or the more frustrating elements perhaps, but this is still a hugely attractive and appealing job, isn't it? And there are dozens and dozens of head coaches who jump at the chance, undoubtedly, to manage Sunderland. The challenge for Kirill Louis-Dreyfus and Christian Speakman is picking the right man, and there's more pressure on picking the right man after the kind of disaster, maybe that's too strong, of the Michael Beale tenure. And the other thing is, because I guess when a name like this emerges, I'm not going to lie, I hadn't really heard of him a week ago when this name first crept out. And when a name like this emerges, given that we now have really so little to go off, which is either worrying or Credit to Sunderland again. I think that'll become clear when the point made. But given there's so little to go off, well, we know there's got to be names out there. There are names out there. There are managers out there who are being considered who we don't know. So your instinctive reaction is to kind of jump on something like that. But here we are in the same position, and if someone said to me now, like next Friday, we're going to be doing a video, where will things be then? I wouldn't be confident. I hope I'm wrong. I wouldn't be confident at this stage in saying that things will be down the line, because the suggestions are that there won't be. There's nothing imminent.
Yeah, it feels like that purely because of the Will Still stuff, and I guess we'll finish the head coach bit with him. With these links with Lons, do you think the Sunderland are going to miss out on him? Is that the way that you see this going?
Honestly, I don't know. I know that's a garbage answer, and that's not me sitting on the fence. But he's desperate to manage in England, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's taken every opportunity over the last 6 or 7 months. I think he is a bit of a self-publicist, isn't he? You know,
I mean, he's well within his rights for doing what he's doing.
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, yeah, understandably, yeah. You would do, wouldn't you? If you like, his stock might never be higher. He'll think it would be. He'd back himself to succeed in his next job, but it might not be. This might be his big chance to get a job in England in the Championship. But there comes a time, doesn't there? Like we were saying earlier this week, there comes a time when Sunderland have to say, right, whether it's Still or anyone else, if they're deliberating, if they're waiting over anything, it's now or never. If you're not going to take the job now, we're moving on. Because there comes a time, and I know this is very much a manager's market this summer, isn't it, given the jobs that are available. But there comes a time when Sunderland need to have a new head coach in place. We can't be having this same conversation a month down the line, can we, with the players back in for pre-season and with friendlies around the corner. There comes a time in the coming weeks when a decision has to be made and an appointment has to be made.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about tomorrow being the day, thinking, no, that is that going to be a day? But you rightly mentioned there, when the players come back at the end of June, that is the absolute sort of cut-off line, isn't it? You have to have a head coach in for... I mean, it needs to be in before then, but you absolutely have to have a head coach in for when the players return in pre-season.
For all sorts of reasons, like clearly for the preparations, for the message it sends to the fans, for the message it sends to the players, for the players with uncertain futures, Jack Clark, Jobe Bellingham, who we're going to talk about, but also whoever's coming in is going to need time to put their print on things, to put their stamp on the squad and how things want to play. And clearly, the longer he has to do that, the more chance he has and Sunderland have of making a decent start next season. And it feels like, given the way this season, last season ended, a bright start is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. But like we said at the start of the show, it just feels as though it's very much ongoing at the moment. Quite a lot happened yesterday without a lot happening. So we'll leave the head coach stuff there for another day, which seems, no closer to that, it seems, for next week. And we'll move on to another bit of important news that came out yesterday as well for Raphael Wicky, well-respected journalist, obviously globally, and reports from The Athletic as well, linking Jobe Bellingham with a number of Premier League clubs, Brentford and Crystal Palace mainly. I guess first to start on that, because we're going to go into some stats on Jobe, or I'm going to, because there's a piece coming out on We Are Sunderland later on. But initially, what's your assessment of Premier League interest in Jobe off the back of the season that he's had?
I'm not surprised. I think it's inevitable for a few reasons, really. He's Sunderland's success in finding young players and developing them. The fact that he's played such a key role at 18-year-old and is clearly such a huge talent. The fact he's versatile and has played in a number of roles. And like, clearly you don't want to overplay this, but his name as well. His name means there's always going to be extra attention around him. Now, I think the interest is like absolutely valid, regardless of what his surname is. I think they'd be interested in him, but that just builds the attention around him, doesn't it? So I'm not at all surprised. I don't know what you think. It feels a bit early for me. I think, and I'm not just saying this with a Sunderland hat on. I undoubtedly think Bellingham would be better off staying and I know there's so many factors that Bellingham would have to consider here. And again, how many opportunities do you get? He will, but you never know whether this is going to be your only chance. Like, clearly it won't be, but you take the point. But I don't know. I think, like, regardless of all that we've talked about and the way last season played out, he's managed to enhance his burgeoning reputation in what was a difficult season for Sunderland. So imagine what he could do if Sunderland get back on track next season and play well.
And we sort of spoke about him last week, didn't we, after the England call-up, about what he did, but certainly the first half of the season as well. He very much just established himself as one of Sunderland's best players, and that continued as much as he was then tarnished with a bit of the criticisms of the second half of the season as the entire squad sort of dropped off. Unfairly, again, as we've spoken about, in some aspects, some justified. But that in itself sort of tells you a little bit about him, doesn't it? Because his performance has put him in the position where he deserved to be starting regularly for Sunderland. Equally, then it showed you where Sunderland were at in terms of their squad depth, that they were having to over-rely on the 17, 18-year-old lad this season to play the amount of minutes that he's played. I think he's sixth in Sunderland's team this year with regards of minutes played. And when you look at that compared to the Championship overall, I think it's 57th. There's only 56 players played more than him this season, 18-year-old. And the only player of his age who's played more is Archie Gray at Leeds, who's been linked with, I think, Bayern Munich this week, I think I saw. So even just that, like the over-reliance on someone like him, again, like I say, it's twofold, isn't it? For how good he's been and where Sunderland have been.
Yeah, and 100%. And I think when you're the age he is, so first things first, he loves it at Sunderland, doesn't he? Yep. He's talked openly about that. I think he said he's fell in love with the club, the area. He loves being here. He despite the frustrations, and he'll feel it as much as anyone. He's loved his first season at Sunderland. I think when you're that age, it's so important, isn't it, to keep taking forward steps. Obviously, at the Echo, we cover Middlesbrough as well, and Rav van den Berg, who they signed last year from Holland, was very much in demand. 18-year-old teenage defender, wanted by Juventus, Dortmund, AC Milan, Ajax, and he signed for Middlesbrough because, and he's gone on the record to say, he realised the importance of playing regular games. We spoke to him at the end of the season because there's a lot of speculation linking him again with a move this summer. And again, he talked about, I know there's interest and I can't control what bids are going to come in, but I feel I'm in the right place because I'm playing, and that's what's most important to me at this stage. And I think that stands for Bellingham as well. Now, I'm not saying that he'd go to Palace or Brentford and not play, and you only have to look at the success the success Palace have had in signing players from the EFL. I know we're going to compare a couple in a minute, but I think it's at that stage where he's only 18. There's a year or two down the line, he's still a really young player, but with all that experience behind him and well equipped, and who knows, he might get there with Sunderland in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to jump into some of these stats now, so bear with us because this might go on a little bit, but because I'm going to break it down into Sunderland comparisons, the league comparisons, and then sort of age bracket comparisons. Like I said, there's going to be a bit on We Are Sunderland later today that'll touch on this in full detail, so make sure you look out for that. But we touched on it earlier. 7 goals this season for Bellingham. Only Clark scored more with 15. Only Clark had a higher XG. He was 4th in terms of key passes behind Dan Neil, Patrick Roberts, Jack Clark. He was second. He was the second most foul player behind Jack Clark. So those interesting stats. But here is where he really sort of, now I know, depending on his position, this is going to be important, but his defensive actions from the front, sort of pressing and winning the ball back, his work ethic, this is where it really stands out. First with defensive actions, first with aggressive actions, first with pressures, first with possession-adjusted pressures, first with pressure regains, first with pressure in the opposition half, first with counter pressures. You can see even just by those stats, and that's compared to Sunderland, the rest of Sunderland's squad, how important he's been in that leading the press from the front. Compare that with the Championship, for example. He was 6th most foul player. Jorginho Rutter, Clark, Kyle Walker-Peters, Somerville and Kenneth McLean, the only players fouled more than him this season. So that'll kind of tell you that he's getting the ball in dangerous areas. Those defensive actions, 8th in the Championship, 13th for aggressive actions, 4th for pressures, 4th for possession-adjusted pressures. Like I said earlier, 57th when it comes to minutes played. Now, if you crop that down to an age bracket of Jobe. StatsBomb takes it up to 19. So he's second for most goals in the division behind Jordan James, Birmingham. First for key passes, first for XG, first for XG assists, third for dribbles, first for fouls won, first for total shots, first for defensive actions and aggressive actions, second to Archie Gray for defensive regains, second for opposition half-ball recoveries, first for pressures, and he's second for his shot on ball value at that age as well. So that's quite a lot to take in, because I'm just reading off a list there. But there's a lot of firsts and a lot of seconds in there for a young lad who's just had his first full season coming off the back of a move from Birmingham. And you can understand, because clubs do look at these sort of numbers, why he would be of interest.
Well, I was going to say that a few things stood out to me. But like, clubs will be well aware of that, and will have been throughout the season. The other thing that stood out to me is it's kind of easy to forget that he played such little football before he signed for Sunderland, and he made 6 appearances or 6 starts off the top of my head for Birmingham the season.
Yeah, he's made 43 starts for Sunderland this season, 45 appearances in the league, 43 as a starter.
And I think here we need to say, let's be honest, we've given Sunderland a fair bit of stick, a lot of it absolutely deserved in the last few months. But what a brilliant signing a year ago! What a brilliant bit of recruitment to pluck a player with such talent, to be able to tempt a player with such talent to Sunderland for what was a small fee, in the whole scheme of things. What would he go for if he was going to go this summer? You'd be looking at north of 10 million quid. It's so hard, but easy, wouldn't you? Just given the potential and everything to come.
The value of something I was going to touch on there as well. Transfer market had him valued at 9 million, and that's gone up to 12 million now as well. Obviously, that's you can take that with a pinch of salt and things like that, but that is where he's been valued there. Clark valued at 15 million on that scale as well. You'd probably put him maybe a little bit higher, but I think I agree that 10 million figure certainly seems it. And another thing as well, we'll bring this graphic up, is the positions that he's played.
Yeah.
We spoke about it following that England call-up, didn't we? That's one thing that he probably needs to focus on. It's one thing he said after the Cardiff game, the coach needs to determine where I need to play. But look at that. Look, he's played all over the field. Centre-forward's been the most sort of commonplace that he's featured, but he's played defensive midfield, left and right, centre midfield, left and right. He's played out on the left, he's played as the 10, and then he's played through the middle as well. So to get those stats again in your first season, playing in all these different positions, credit where it's due, I think.
And the indication, certainly from the Athletic report on Thursday night, seemed to be that's one of the key elements that appeals to Brentford. That versatility, the fact that he can play midfield and up front, and looks equally as comfortable in both, doesn't he? I think often with versatile players, you see them as kind of midfield players who can do a job up front, number 10s who can do a job deeper. That's not the case with Jobe, is it? Yeah. He looks and feels equally comfortable wherever he plays. And we only talked about it earlier this week, didn't we? Touchwood Bellingham stays at Sunderland this summer. One of the interesting questions for the new head coach will be, well, now it's going to be, are you confident you can keep Bellingham? If the answer is yes, it's, well, where's he going to play for you? And regardless of what the answer is, he's going to be a huge player next season, isn't he? Which again, like 18.
And going back to the links as well, Brentford and Palace, they're two teams that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? The way that they've gone about their business. You mentioned Palace specifically. Some of the players that they've brought in under Dougie Freedom when he's been in their sporting director, Conor Gallagher on loan, Mark Gay, Michael Alisi, Eberechi Ise, Adam Wharton, the one who went in January, and he's one that I'm going to compare Bellingham to now. But he fits that sort of mould, doesn't he?
Oh, he does, absolutely. If you're a Premier League club and you're looking down to the Championship, then Bellingham is undoubtedly one of those who will stand out. And if we were having the conversation a week ago and someone had said that there are going to be a couple of clubs in the Premier League linked with Bellingham in the next week, who will there be? Crystal Palace and Brentford would have undoubtedly been in the conversation, wouldn't they? they're not the only clubs interested by any stretch. Lazio were previously linked in January, weren't they, when they made the move for Jack Clark. There are clubs on the continent also looking, and there are other Premier League clubs who kind of monitored his situation and might well be sparked into life, sparked into action now if Palace or Brentford firm up their interest with a bid. And I think it's worth stressing here, because I don't think we have, that as of this morning, as of Friday morning, there hadn't been any concrete bids for Bellingham. Whether that changes in the next week or two, let's see. And then it goes back to, well, if you get a bid like that, what's the manager think of it? Well, we don't know, because we don't know who the manager is. That's where it feels like we need movement. But let's not get back to that. Let's talk Adam Wharton instead and compare.
Yeah. And he's the perfect example, because obviously he went from Blackburn in January, and I mean, look what he's done now in the second half of the Premier League season, being called up to Gareth Southgate's provisional European Championship squad. If you compare the two there, Jobe Bellingham in the red, Adam Wharton in the blue, this is for a central midfield role. Now, obviously, you can see Wharton probably eclipses him quite a few. I think there's 11 points on the radar, and this is sort of a per 90. I think it ends up 7-4 in Wharton's favour. One of those is turnovers, though, as well. So technically, Bellingham probably wins that in terms of Wharton giving possession away a lot. But if you move that into attacking midfield roles and striking roles like these two radars, you can see it's much more equal. And bear in mind that Wharton's got 2 years on Bellingham here as well, and the season that he played in the Championship. I think he had 18 appearances for Blackburn last year, so he had that already under his belt going into this season. These are all stats based on this season as well. You can see, I mean, if you're just following Wharton as an example of a career path and trajectory and stats and things like that, he's very much on the right track, isn't he? You know, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but you look at what he's done over these last 12 months with Blackburn, and then moving to Palace, and now in the England frame. Jobe's obviously been in the England setup as well as a youth player, under 20s later this month, or next month, sorry. You can see he's sort of on that path, can't you?
Yeah, and I think kind of it's worth pointing out here that all of the above, everything we've talked about in the last 10, 15 minutes or so, has come in a struggling team, really, in a team second half of the season, especially that like we know all that's been going on in the background, the struggle for results, the kind of lack of a feel-good factor around the club and among the fan base. So I think that makes it even more impressive for a young lad to be able to deal with all that, to be able to deal with the turbulence, to be able to deal with managers coming and going. Now, clearly he's helped by the fact that Mike Dodds, who's been a constant and an interim head coach twice, worked with both Jobe and Jude as they were coming through the ranks at Birmingham, and it's no secret that Dodds was a key factor in Jobe choosing Sunderland a year ago. But still, I think it says so much about his character as well as the qualities that are clear there.
I think just to finish on Jobe as well, the character seems something that's quite instilled within the family, doesn't it? I mean, you look at how Jude's kind of handled himself with Madrid, and like even in the media when he's speaking after Champions League games and that, and you look at Jobe's interviews with the club at the end of the season and when he spoke to us, it feels very level-headed for the age of the both of them, really, doesn't it?
Well, I remember being at Southampton away this year when someone got beat there, and that had been a difficult afternoon, hadn't it? I know Jobe had obviously scored the goal, hadn't he? Great goal. But some of them were given the run around for the first half and for the last 20 minutes. And the kind of press room's a bit of a strange setup there, in that it's a big room, but as you go out of it, there's like one of the lounges where fans are, and obviously come full time and come early evening, the fans have had a fair few scoops, as you would do if you were in one of those lounges watching the game. And Jobe came in afterwards and was stood with like his family and friends and what have you. And a fair few fans were coming up to him and talking. It was all like, really kind of good natured and just general talking, just as you would if you're a fan and you see a player there. But on the back of a kind of disappointing defeat, when it will have still felt raw. And I was only kind of glancing from not afar, but from a distance, like the way Jobe was kind of handling himself and stood there like willingly chatting away and talking. Again, I thought was like credit to his character, really. And like you said, I haven't spoken to him personally in any post-match interviews. I think Sunderland have kind of carefully and understandably managed how much press and how much media he's done this year because of, and Mike Dodds was great, wasn't it, talking. Michael Walker from The Athletic at the back end of the season had asked Dodds in depth about kind of Bellingham and the season he's had. And Dodds talked in depth, certainly the most he's ever talked this season, about kind of what it's like to be Jude Bellingham's brother. And that's when the quotes came out about how much he loves Sunderland, how much he's fallen in love with the area and the club and the people, which all you'd hope will play in Sunderland's favour when it comes to keeping hold of him this summer.
Yeah, he's certainly one that if he does go, just given the numbers and the stats and what we've spoken about the last 10 or 15 minutes there will be an impact there. And just quickly on that Southampton game, I think what was testament to him again was he was obviously at fault for the first goal that Sunderland conceded that day. And then he picked himself up and he went and scored what was the equaliser at the time as well. So credit him for that in game again about his age. But to move on, just finally, more links this week as well with a potential incoming. It's all sort of been who might not be coming or who might be going. West Ham young striker, Divin Mubama, he's been one that's been constantly linked over the last sort of 6 months. Out of contract with West Ham in the summer. Another capped by England youth levels quite a few times. He made 5 appearances in the Premier League this year. His goal record at youth levels very impressive, to be honest. 30 and 47 at under 18s level, 16 and 30 in Premier League 2 level, 10 and 9 as a Youth Cup winner. Obviously part of the West Ham squad who won the Europa Conference League last year as well, and he scored in the Europa Conference League. Ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't he, for this sort of model that Sunderland are going after up front?
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth there. It does tick a lot of boxes, doesn't it? It feels very Sunderland, doesn't it? And understandably so. And Sunderland have had huge success in taking players from not just West Ham, but from the capital, haven't they, in recent years? Pierre Ekwa, Adji Elise, Dan Ballard, who've all established themselves. And I think all of them, if they get a run in the side, a run fully fit, Ballard undoubtedly. But then I think Ekwa, the frustration with Ekwa is the challenge is still consistency. Elise, if they all get a run in the team at the best, it's absolutely not outlandish to say they're potential Premier League players down the line, are they? So again, I think Sunderland deserve credit for that, for those sorts of players. If he does come in, if Mubama does come in, clearly expectations need to be managed, which is what Christian Speakman talked about this season, didn't he? And how Hemia and Mayenda are the 2 examples last year. You can't expect these players to come in and kind of hit the ground running straight away. For all that would be a kind of exciting signing and would tick a lot of boxes, still feels like there need to be some ready-made signings this summer as well, doesn't it? Undoubtedly.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just put a link in our comments on this video for a tactical piece, a bit of a profile piece on Mubama and what he could possibly bring. But you mentioned there that I'm going to bring up the likes of Hemia and Mayenda, who came in last summer, and even Rusyn, I suppose. This one feels a little bit more, I don't know, would you feel more confident in someone like Mubama working than one of them, just given what I've listed off there in terms of his record in Premier League youth teams?
Yeah, well, I think first things first, on a human level, it's going to be easier to settle for someone who's played in the UK as you know, the Rusyn we've talked about, clearly like a huge cultural switch for him, but also for Hemia and Mayenda when you consider the age they are and moving for the first time, a move like that, and then that's without even considering getting the grips for life in the Championship and the weight of wearing, you know, what you want the kind of shirt to be light, don't you? But the weight of wearing a number 9 shirt for Sunderland, if things aren't going to plan, if things are getting difficult. The Dodds talked, didn't he, about Burstow and how he felt that he was the victim of not getting off to a good enough start, really. You know, if you score a goal, if you score a couple of goals early, well, you're away then. Well, none of them did last year, did they? And you look at Hemia and Mayenda and think, like, clearly the first season they might make big forward steps, and let's judge them on pre-season and what we see next season. But as we stand now, you look and think loan moves for both wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, would it?
Yeah, that's something that we'll probably discuss over the coming weeks because we've got the delights of the transfer window to open shortly. Sunderland might have a head coach by then. We'll leave it there. John, thanks very much for joining us. Sadly, still no head coach for us to report on just yet. But still plenty going on at Sunderland, and we'll have you covered. We'll have you covered at We Are Sunderland for the rest of the day and, of course, over the weekend until we're back next week. So make sure you subscribe, £1 to read all our content, and then it's $2.99 beyond that. And give us a like and subscribe to our Facebook, to our YouTube channel as well. It's much appreciated. We love it when you engage with us on these vids as well. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.